So I'm going to turn this over to Brian to talk about the corrections manpower. Yep.
The manpower in the jail currently, we have 1 lieutenant, 4 sergeants, 3 corporals, and 62 correctional officers. That's currently what we are operating under right this second. I'm not sure if the next slide has. Our needs or requests that we're looking for are 12 additional correctional officers, radios he spoke to, the body cams he spoke to. There are some surveillance camera updates that we'd like to try to, we have security cameras inside the jail. During the renovation project, a lot of the new cameras were installed, but the existing cameras were basically just funneled into that server. So we'd like to have some kind of plan to start replacing some of those so that they're not all at one time. At some point, if we put it off, we're going to be looking at replacing 229 at the same time. We had a meeting with Lloyd to talk about a structured plan at some point where instead of trying it all at one time, that we just chisel away in sections so that the county's never incumbent of completely revamping that whole system.
And what was the timeline of that like?
I believe when we were speaking with Lloyd, he spoke of a 5-year plan that where stuff
Okay.
would come together that way. And he'd have.
Hey Brian?
Yes.
I have a question regarding the additional 12 COs.
Correct.
Is that on top of the additional funds that we gave you for 15?
I will be completely honest, I don't know of the funding and that kind of situation that you're speaking to. I am basically, I can tell you where we come up with the 12, because I guess I wasn't sitting at the table back then when we were, those discussions. But when we put together what they call a staffing plan for Bureau of Adult Detention, that's who oversees, we have to follow jail standards, and the sheriff's mandated to operate that. We have 21 housing units now. Those are individual areas with officers and can hold inmates. That staffing plan was put together with thinking that we would have a minimum of 15 COs to operate that jail. That's with everything open. That's where the 12 comes in, because if you take 15 per shift, that's not putting in a relief factor. So a standard relief factor of 1.72 puts you at roughly 25.8, if I'm not correct on my math, 25.8 officers per shift. That's so that COs do have days off, so that covers their days off and any time off, so that you have a staffing plan going forward for your jail standards that says we have a plan that will operate this jail safely, that also encompasses for the time off. And there's a lot of other standards that go to that, but right now we've operated for the last several years operating under, we have 13 working, like today if you walk down there there'll be 13 officers working, but one wing is closed. Because when the construction project, and even though I wasn't at the table when it started, they finished the E wing, which is the new construction part. When we occupied that, that was phase 1, but they closed down to renovate other areas. So what happened was, say C wing was next, those 2 officers that were working that C wing were diverted over to the new E wing while that was closed. And then when C wing was done, D wing was done, and ultimately A wing was done. A wing was where they last finished renovation before they pulled out. And that's where the pitch is of now you gotta, although we have had the jail open, it hasn't fully opened all 21 housing units yet. And that's where we're at. I don't know of the 15. I can tell you, like, what do we have this year compared to last year? There's still a couple vacancies, so it could be attrition, it could be a loss in that aspect too. I don't know what the funding would have been that you're speaking of last year, because I wouldn't have been at the table, so I don't want to speak incorrectly for that.
So Brian, you guys are not at full capacity. Your full capacity with everything open would be like 350?
360.
And you're averaging about 200 and some
Right,
on average?
yeah, right now the gates just opened. I like to put it that way. We've operated, and that's why it wasn't as big of a deal for the last year. We went right into COVID, so there probably wasn't a huge push for the manpower. We made it work. But yeah, the numbers are, you'll see they're starting to climb back up. We were down to as low as 100 for a minute. But yeah, they're 200 today, 220 yesterday.
And we've got one complete wing that we couldn't open it up if we wanted to, because we would be in violation of the minimum jail standards. Because of manpower, we couldn't do it, and it's closed down. And that's one of the things that, we'll get to that, is we've met with Pete Elliott from the Marshals Service. So they've got a couple of concerns, because there's a number of federal the federal holding facility, the name skips me, it's
CCA over in Youngstown.
yes,
Lost theirs.
and now all of a sudden they've got like 700 some federal inmates that need to be housed. We were approached also because of the fact that they would be able to do this on a continuous basis. And our thought process was to be able to almost do that entire wing, because the income levels that you'll receive of the funding from the federal prisoners it's a huge number that could really go to the bottom line. I know that in Geauga County, there's been some years that we've brought in as much as $3 million from the federal prisoners that we've housed there. And it just could really offset a huge portion of our operation in our jail and the costs by being able to build that relationship and have that ability to do it. But we're at the point right now that, so what happens on the federal level is there's the state regulations that we have to follow from the Board of Adult Detention. And then there's the feds would come in to evaluate us based off of the federal regulations. Though there's not as much, they require more as far as like the rooms and certain things that are required for like the Zoom stuff and a lot of the, which our jail fulfills all of those. But the other one would be the manpower, and where we're at right now, we couldn't open it up under the state standards, let alone trying to think that we could even move forward. They won't even entertain the idea of coming to talk to us until we would be able to just be at the minimum state standards.
I think when this jail was being planned and everything, I think we were misled, really, because we were told
I agree with
we
you.
would need less people because of the way it was built and the cameras and everything, and you wouldn't have to move prisoners. So, we were convinced.
I've heard that rumor, and I've heard that rumor, and that's unfortunate if that is what happened, because although there are some cameras, but case in point, an inmate that would be on, say, a behavior watch or a suicide watch is considered where they're checked every 10 minutes. By standard alone, that can't be done with a camera. That it has to be done with somebody physically walking in and doing that. Although they can continue to watch for the safety, because we do have a liability of taking care of every inmate that's in that jail.
But Brian, there's still blind spots.
Absolutely.
I remember sitting in the central tower there.
Yeah.
You can't see if they go like in the bathroom.
Absolutely. And that brings up a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because I forgot you were down and we walked through there. I remember that.
Yeah.
But that's why it's so important when we talk about staffing. I said 21 housing units. Well, I said 15 officers. Obviously, there ain't an officer in every housing unit. So to her point, yeah, if that officer's walking through there, and I think, Ralph, are you going to show a video? There is a video Ralph's going to show here later in a second, that if that were to happen in one of them housing units, to your blind spot, not having somebody there to at least see that officer didn't pop through the next door, that's huge. And that's huge not just from an officer safety point, but we also have a responsibility to provide safety for the inmates that are there. Ultimately, the sheriff has that responsibility, and so he don't want inmate or CO hurt inside that jail. And the only way to accomplish that is by actually staffing it in a safe manner. And that's where his point of the federal program, they're not going to entertain it if you can't say, yes, we have a safe plan to staff that whole wing.
So
and we are safely operating it now. But
you're talking about a funding stream, though, that can come to this if
absolutely
we go that way. You're saying $3 million, Jago, was that per year?
So
or?
we've had up to $3 million. I would have to check our numbers, but last year I believe we had $1.5 million, close to $2 million brought in. And they've been, it allowed us at that county to really expedite the payoff of our safety center, because it was money that we never actually, had really ever thought that we were going to be, receiving, and it's just a gift that keeps giving. But Commissioner Klein, I totally agree with you. I think that there were some, I think that, you know, as the sheriff and I, and I'll tell you, you know, Lieutenant Morgenstern has been just an absolute, you know, joy to work with, and his passion with the jail, and the sheriff will also, you know, support that. It's been, we feel that you're 100% right, that there was just some misinformation. And I don't know if it was deliberate misinformation.
I would hope not.
I don't think it was. I think what happens is sometimes you just look at a situation and until you really get into it, there's just so many moving parts that that you sometimes can get focused on one thing and miss the other. So now, you know, we're coming into this, you know, and we're just basically looking at this, and when we're looking at the jail standards and they have to get inspected every year, we have to remain closed because the biggest thing is our responsibility is keeping our officers safe and our prisoners safe. But the other thing is our other primary goal is keeping the liability off of the county and the county commissioners, so we will never put you in a position of that. So we've had to basically make the decision to retain that position of closure, and until we can get to that point. But I can tell you, it's starting pretty heavy right now, where you know, there has been an increase in drugs, there has been an increase in overdoses, we're seeing it where it's growing, and this whole COVID thing has really kind of put a change in crime. And now that we are in a situation that we have had to take a position, and the sheriff has taken a position, is we are not going to risk more lives through deaths of overdoses. We're taking an enforcement position, and he's seeing his numbers grow, and across the country you're seeing the numbers grow. So it's just going to be a matter of time that we're going to have, you know, and also as the courts now are starting to open up more with cases and taking on more cases, you're going to see the need is going to be more there. So I totally agree with you, and it's just unfortunate sometimes. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but you know, we're here. And then if you could talk a little bit about the training as far as the academy and stuff.
Okay, so a correction officer, once they're hired or working in our jail, they then have 12 months to complete the corrections academy through APATA. COVID hit us the hardest right there, to be honest with you, because we had acquired several newer officers right before COVID came. We had plans to get them through the training, but when COVID came, every training class, college campus, it all shut down. And in fact, we're still struggling now to find a way to get a few classes going. But with that training that is required by Ohio mandate for those officers, they have to, that's a 4 to 6 week class. So they're gone for 4 to 6 weeks. The training that I speak of there is because now that it means that the people have to fill those positions. So if we're scrambling at the lowest level now to cover, if we could bring additional officers on, although they will also need trained, when these people go off to academy for 4 to 6 weeks, we have a relief factor built in that we can cover the jail without overtime for all those positions. We had one group go out, we were able to get a class with Mahoney County that didn't cost us anything for tuition, but we did have to cover the cost to cover those positions while they were in class. And then that creates a plan for a structured training for not only the ones we got to catch up on because COVID put us behind, but the new hires that we would acquire from there. But they do give us 12 months to do it, so it's not all doom and gloom. If we make the right decisions, we can actually structure a plan that puts us in a better position a year from now.
Okay.
So we've got, I think, about 15.
We've got 15 currently that need it,
Need it.
plus anybody that we would hire that didn't already have it. I should add to that, though, they cannot get that on their own. It's not like the sheriff could hire somebody from the street that could get it on their own. They would have had to have worked in another facility and got it through their employer, because it's not an open enrollment type training class through APATA like with other police divisions.
So then, if we just briefly just on dispatch, dispatch, we have one supervisor, which is Dan, and he's also our 911 coordinator. he has paid $60,000 through the EMA as far as the 911 coordinator, and then anything above that, the benefits and, you know, that compensation is paid by us. We have 2 part-time dispatchers, and we have 10 full-time dispatchers. So total manpower with the supervisor of 13. We are currently, we are in the process right now of working with Garrettsville and Wyndham, Suffield, and I believe Atwater also, and possibly Palmyra too, where we are going to actually be doing the dispatching for all of the fire, for those communities. We currently have, I believe, 2 contracts, which brings in approximately 90,000 right now. We are going to, and that, with that 90,000, that 90,000 has always just been deposited into the general fund. There has never been an official transfer of that 90,000 as far as like offsetting the salaries on the dispatch. It's always just basically been a maintenance of what our dispatchers are, is what it is. So as we would like to ask you is as these agencies are coming on board, is to be able to reflect those dollars, because we are really in a pinch with the 24-hour operation running 3 councils. We add those departments, we're going to have to man that 4th council on a full-time basis. So the reality, we probably are going to need for sure 2, if not 3 full-time. But we have looked at the numbers, we've crunched these numbers, because at the end of the day, we want to make decisions that make sense. If we bring on more work to us, we want to make sure that we're justifying the work and the hours by the means that we're bringing in. With that being said, we will actually exceed what it will cost us to hire those 3 dispatchers with those contracts. But what we would like to ask is that we would be able to have the representation of the money that is coming in now and those contracts to be transferred over, so that we would be able to show the offset on that dispatch.
Now, is the 90,000 anywhere in your budget? It's just.
Nope, it just
No.
goes into the, yep, it's just a
General fund.
deposit as a receipt, and it comes into the fund contract services that then is just transferred over to the general fund.
Okay.
Yep. On the dispatch needs and requests, was the 3 additional dispatchers to handle the additional agencies. But the radios, this is the complete radio and 911 system upgrade. When we have $511,000 currently in the 911 fund. When we have basically had conversation with Ryan Shackelford from EMA and Dan, we're looking at a price tag of about $3 million is what this is, the new radio system would cost us. Part of that upgrade would be that there would be 2 towers. Sheriff actually was at a meeting, we would have 2 towers.
And a booster tower.
And a booster tower. So really 3 towers basically out of that. And then what happens is across the state of Ohio, the way that it's working is the counties basically, you know, construct these towers. Then the system is turned over to the MARC system. And there's a cost of anywhere between $70,000 to $100,000 a year, basic maintenance to these towers. But that turnover to MARCs is handled and paid for by MARCs. The towers then no longer become our responsibility, but they become the responsibility of the MARC system. And then as far as with the radio system, you know, this has been something that you know, from what I was told with our meeting with Dave Blair and Todd Bragg, this is something that has been discussed with the commissioners through the years. They are totally understand and aware of it. It's just, we're going to be at a point where our goal would be is to have a plan that we know that the radio system gets updated, the 911 system for the radios, And we would like to be at the tail end of this, of the conversion with our ground radios for our individual officers, just so that we could hopefully be right at the cusp of that technology point, because it's just like anything else. Technology, next year it's something new. And so we would like to create this plan the right way from the beginning, so that we're not chasing our tail and making an expenditure here and then having to do a comeback to you guys and say, well, we missed this. We want to plan this right. So that's the dispatchers. So I had just done a few things as far as some slides of just the building, conditions as we found it. Just many of the, we've had, some roof leaks, some floors that have been broken up, the doors that have.
This isn't in the new part, is it?
This is within the sheriff's office.
Oh, okay.
This here is a hinge that, one of our detectives tried to put a bolt to fix it. We had to remove the oil cylinder because the oil was going all over the floor, making a trip hazard. And this is one door away from getting into it would be our western jail entrance. This is the door that actually comes from the parking lot. And then you could see just some of the conditions. This is something that was old damage that was within our locker room, that they had some type of a stain, and it built into the ground and has never really been addressed. But what I can tell you is this, is that I have to thank the commissioners, and I have to thank Joanne Townend for helping us to get through this too. We now, have replaced the carpeting in the lieutenant's and the sergeant's office. We have replaced the floors to avoid all these trip hazards and everything. We put these solid floors so that it's maintenance free pretty much, other than, sweeping. They don't require wax. It's a sealed one-piece floor. We have painted all the different offices and hallways. What we've also done with that is we've gotten prisoners that are trustees, and we have built skill too. Many of these guys, like we talk to them, they're encouraged to understanding there's other things other than crime to be able to do when they get out of here, and they're seeing it. So, and the savings for the commissioners also is we're not paying for that help. We're basically, it's just basically we're building skill. We're working on career paths for these individuals, and all it costs us is basically the paint. But, thank you very much for what you guys have done as far as helping us to get stuff, rearranged. Our detective bureau and our carpets have been cleaned. We were in a lot of needs. Some of the things that we would still like to try to see is we have no security key cards access for our exterior doors that go in towards the jail area and into the actual detective bureau. We have, wooden doors with glass that is just the glass that's at the front entrance of the main part of our sheriff's office, you can just push it with your finger and the glass rattles. It's just, basically it could just be broken that simply. And then we have made contact with Joanne that we would like to try to see about the judge signed the order so that now we can hold the civil cases at our sheriff's office for all the sheriff sales. And they actually had a courtroom that was actually built originally when they built the building. So what we're going to do is we want to convert that whole area for the civil office, so that right now she's conducting it on the stairs of the courthouse. And whether it's rain, shine, sleet, or snow, this is what Roxanne is doing there. And it's just it's not good. So we're going to change that. We're going to bring that into the civil office. But what we're going to need is we have a contract that came out with an expense of probably less than $50,000 to redo the civil office and then our CCW office. And there's a wall that's basically that we want to have removed in our detective bureau to give us additional space to be able to have, case preparation and conference center for us to be able to work on cases. And we need to get an architect so that they could work with our building department, assure the plans are correct, signed, stamped, and delivered, and then we could, proceed to try to get the bids then effectively and of what the work needs to be done. And then we're trying to work with maintenance with many of the doors that are broken in there, and just miscellaneous stuff that just kind of became derelict of just over the years that we walked into.
You know, Ralph, we approved a maintenance person for the jail quite a while ago. I don't know whatever, do you know what happened to that, Sabrina?
There was an issue on, I think, how it was gonna be funded, whether it was gonna be a employee of the sheriff's department, but yet the funding was running through Joanne's department. Do you remember that? Internal services?
I don't think Joanne wanted to be in charge of that person.
No, she didn't.
No.
She did not. But that should still have been in the budget for them to hire their own
Right,
maintenance.
that's why.
Because our maintenance people spend a lot of time out there.
Right, you need
And
your
that's
own maintenance person.
why we came up with, you should have your own.
Yeah,
So with the 24/7 operation.
right.
Yeah, and so like, so we had actually, the sheriff had inquired about that, and we, you know, we didn't know exactly where we stood. We were told, at the time that it was just something that we had to go through the, what's the name of the service that you submit a request on, for the maintenance that,
Facility due?
yeah, facility due.
Oh.
It's a computer program that that was what we had to do,
Oh,
that we were only, you know, permitted to put it in through that facility due, request to be able to do that we weren't gonna get a maintenance
that
person
was approved long time
here,
ago.
so,
And that-
yeah. But, maybe if we can, after,
Work on
you know,
that.
we'll look and talk
Yeah.
about that at a later, you know,
Yeah.
it would be a
And
huge deal.
that was approved like 2 years ago,
Yeah.
I wanna say. Cause we brought it up again after the new pod opened. Cause
I
they were
see.
still having a lot of issues.
Okay,
You know, do you think you could prioritize, I mean,
sure,
everything seems priority from what you've talked about.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yep.
we need to break it down into a
Absolutely.
timeline. Yeah, that's what we need to see.
yep,
Yeah, and that's my whole thing is instead of piecemealing it, if you guys could just prioritize
for sure.
what you would like, and then we could start trying to work on some of these.
Yep. So, what I did was, you know, there was when we first took office, I know that there was, you know, some outlets of the media that had, you know, taken a position that we were overpaid and all this, and I just wanted to, you know, looking at this because of the fact too that we're under the budget negotiations right now with, all the contracts are up, like our contracts are actually a year and a half old, that there's no contracts. The deputies have not been operating under any, you know, then it continues over as far as the way that the wording is, but there have been no raises as of last year, no raises as of still this year, that they're at. So I wanted to just kind of go over some of this stuff to just to clarify some things. So as far as with the sheriff's salary is set by the Ohio Revised Code, and it's all based on population, no different than the commissioners.
Yeah.
You know, there's a certain number of people, if your county hits this number, this is what your salary is, and that's the same thing for the sheriff's salary. So on the chief deputy salary, what I basically did is I took, and Commissioner Clown, we had talked about this when I met with you, is I took all the different counties that were basically looking at their financial positioning, that I wanted to make it to be able to be somewhat similar as far as amounts, you know, brought in, amounts going out, and just the financial condition of some of those counties. So with that being said, for the chief's salary, my salary is $104,000. For Stark County, and these are neighboring surrounding counties to us, is $106, almost $2,400 more than myself. In Geauga, it's $115,000. And mind you, in Geauga, the sheriff there makes 85 because the population is less, but there's that much of a difference between a chief and the sheriff's salary. And then in Summit, the chief makes $123,000, a difference of $19,762. So, you know, as far as the numbers of where it's at, I'm at the bottom, and I don't have a problem with that, but it's just a situation that I just needed to clarify that the rates of pay really are not, if you look at if we're comparing apples to apples, it's really you know, there's not, you know, what some had said abuse, it's not abuse.